No. Aloha kako, and welcome to everyone who's here. Please get cookies if you're arriving in person, and I'm very sorry for the virtual audience, you can't have these delicious cookies. It's my great pleasure to introduce this colloquium today. My name is Miriam Stark, and I am currently the director for the University of Hawaii at Manoa's Center for Southeast Asian Studies. And today we have the great good fortune of launching off the first of our multi-part series of talks and ponderings about some of our loose Southeast Asia transitions work that Chris Yunada and Jeff Fox pioneered, and they're running in Southeast Asia. So I'm just here to introduce you to the speakers for today, and also to say that we're very fortunate, and we're very grateful to the Luce Foundation for giving us the Luce Southeast Asia Transitions grant that's allowed us to launch this interesting initiative. Today's talk, which I think Krishna and Olivia will present with some facilitation by Jeff Fox, is entitled Collaborative Field-Based Learning in Southeast Asia, Value and Challenges. So please join me in welcoming our speakers for today. Thank you.
Oh, aloha. I'm Jeff Fox from the East West. I'm recently 3/4 retired, but still got a foot in the game to work on these Luce grants. This, as Miriam said, was a Luce Southeast Asia grant to the University of Hawaii, on which she is PI. There's going to be a series of 4 of these at 3 p.m. And as the title says, collaborative field-based learning research. In the field, we called it a field school, but this is so much more than a field school. It is really a collaborative learning and research activity that engaged young Southeast Asian scholars. That is what Luce is actually trying to do, is promote the development of new young Southeast Asian scholars, both in the US and in Southeast Asia. So we have very strong partner relationships with a number of universities in the region. And we worked with 2 of them on this one, Unhas in Indonesia and Khon Kaen University in Thailand. And you will be hearing about that. And I also have to say, the incredible amount of work that Dr. Krishna Yunada and her assistant, Olivia Meyer, put into making this happen. It was the first go around, it was hard to pull off. But they did an excellent job, and we are hoping, with a little money from Miriam, to get another one out of here, maybe in the summer of 2025. But hopefully we can figure out how to make it super and easy. Wow.
Okay, so thank you so much for coming and for attending for our audience in the cyberspace on Zoom. So Olivia and I are going to be the primary speaker for this one, and we will have more, and I will explain later about the upcoming presentations in this series. But at the same time, I also want to acknowledge that there are 2 other co-investigators for this one particular project. This is a branch of the bigger initiative that Jeff and Miriam just mentioned. And they are Dr. Ming-Li Yong and Dr. Micah Fisher, who are fellows at the East West Center. Because this is a big endeavor that without the collaborations, not just from the core team, just the 4 of us, but also our partners in Universitas Hasanuddin in Indonesia, as well as from Khon Kaen University in Thailand. And in between, there are a lot of supporting staff and students, graduate students, undergraduate students that are involved in this. So I just wanted to kind of like continue what Miriam and Jeff had mentioned about building this collaborative work. But many of us usually aspire to want to do a multidisciplinary work or multicultural international work. many of us in geography, especially, would always kind of like think about that. And yet, the model that had sort of like that I had experienced often is not easy. It's very hard to operationalize this ideal about like how do you make communications going effectively when there are some language barrier? What language are we going to operate in when we're really in the field? And how do you cross disciplinary differences in perspective about whose questions are going to be used? So there are all these challenges, practical challenges, that we thought with this field school exercise, maybe we would be able to experiment with what kind of tools that are open to this breaking the barrier or crossing the barrier in that sense. So as I mentioned, there's a couple of the FOPI here that were not able to join us because they are currently actually in Southeast Asia. So Dr. Ming-Li Young was the one who really brought this idea about field-based learning because when she was a student at National University of Singapore, actually joined a field school and felt that her perspective was changed because of that. Then she also became, after receiving her PhD from University of Sydney, she actually became a staff teaching staff at the School for Field Studies in Siem Reap in Cambodia. And so she had this kind of like both sides of being the recipient as well as the organizer of a field school. But again, that field school, just like many of our study abroad experiences, really focus on bringing students from somewhere else, like usually based in universities such as in the United States, in Australia, or in Singapore, to another place to do field work. What we wanted to do is slightly different. But the other argument about this field-based learning, the reason why we feel strongly about field-based learning is because in field-based learning, you don't just learn about the place cognitively, but also affectively. You can smell the place. If you work on waste management, then you can smell the garbage. If you work in agriculture, then you actually can empathize with people working in the middle of the day in the heat and walking steep hill. And then you can also hear the voices of the community member that are in that are the subject of all this agrarian change that we were looking at. So this empathy, building this empathy, and can really change the preconception that students without field-based learning might actually have. So as I mentioned, there was something different about this compared to other field school or study abroad experiences. And I'm not minimizing the value of that because that's what field-based learning is. But in this case, when we put it as a joint field school, we wanted to make sure that there is parity. There is kind of like both sides of the partnership would also benefit, especially for the junior scholars. So we brought 10 students from University of Hawaii, including undergraduate students. 2 undergraduate students joined the graduate students in our exercise. And that when we were out in the field, we were joined by 12 junior scholars and graduate students from Khon Kaen universities and also from the University of Hassanudin. Okay. So two-way learning, but obviously we face linguistic, cultural, and disciplinary barrier that we will talk about a little bit later. And some of this, for instance, from the 10 students who went to Indonesia and Thailand, 4 of them did not speak any of the languages until 3 weeks prior to their field. And some of our partners had limited English capacity of communicating directly. So we had to depend on either translations by person, happen to have a few people who speak two languages and that kind of like direct person translation. Or often we just went to Google Translate that like worked very, very well, but not when we're doing the interviews. So that's what the other lesson that we were learning that we were able to do. So I'm hoping that this field-based learning would build this foundation for future research network that hopefully with the young scholars, both from the United States or in our case, actually from Brunei, from Malaysia, and from Thailand and Indonesia could build toward the future. Okay, so we were very fortunate, as Miriam and Jeff mentioned, we have two universities that already work with us for a long time. And that's the Universitas Hasanuddin in Indonesia and Khon Kaen University. And this, just see if, I just want to acknowledge that in Hasanuddin, we were fortunate to be facilitated by Professor Alif Sahide and another person, Nur Hadi, who's not pictured in this. And then in Khon Kaen, we were facilitated especially by Professor Sukanlaya Chunquan and Professor Payom Siriparom. And Payom was not in this picture. Usually that's because the other person is actually already facilitating us in order to go to the field. So when the team arrived, actually a lot of logistical issue has been taken care of. But what I wanted to mention is that even though the field school itself was only done beginning of April, that lasts for 2 weeks and then followed by 1 week workshop, a lot of the homework, a lot of the preparation already went in beginning in January 2023. And we had number of consultation with Alif and Ajahn Khan that grew into like involving more and more people into the Zoom talk, deciding on topic, deciding on location, the scope. And we thought that we already had this connection, but as you will learn later, there are more to be done. So all this work come together, and by the time we were ready to go to launch, the plan is so much have improved, so much better than when the first time the core team talk about like how are we going to do this joint fields. Okay, so part of that is beginning like, okay, throughout the spring, we work with partners to have all the planning, but recruitment as well. And part of that required sort of like orienting our own students. So this was at Manoa. So I'm going to hand it over to Olivia, who actually were responsible for a lot of this preparation before we departed. Without her assistance, and also with Scott, who is right there, I just want to acknowledge Scott as well as one of our capable GAs that really helped to make this happen. Take it over.
Thank you, Krista. I'll take your spot. Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about our pre-departure preparations, including recruitment and our travel preparations, and then our methods training. So last spring, we held 2 interest meetings actually in this room, where we had about 30 undergraduate and graduate students attend from the University of Hawaii. And we basically gave an overview of what we thought the field school would look like, but also anticipated kind of advantages of participation and challenges, including travel fatigue or adjusting to rural life, things like that. So after we selected our students, we waited till the semester ended and then had a 3-week training program and methods, which we called a boot camp. And I helped lead this along with Scott Allen, who is there, a PhD student in learning design and technology. I'm so glad he's in the room. And I focused more on the qualitative methods while Scott focused more on training the students in ArcGIS online story maps. And then we ended that 3 weeks with a presentation at the East-West Center. You can see it on this picture here on the right there, where we were able to get feedback from folks at the East-West Center and University of Hawaii, from staff and faculty and students, which is just really great as a check-in before we left for the fields. Okay, so for 3 weeks, as I mentioned, we worked on field school training. And so that included learning about different types of methods, meeting virtually with our local partners, and then also doing out-of-class assignments. And so the goal was to have students learn about the background of the region, get some analytical tools. So how do we ask research questions? And then also technological tools. And we kind of started out talking about research ethics, thinking through how do we do interviews ethically, how do we do ethnographies or write field notes, and present visual data in an ethical way. So we had readings and discussions on making sure that research collaborators, interviewees were active participants in the research process, the importance of informed consent, making sure that we talk through creating space for people to ask questions and know where the data is going, really important considerations. And then also got into what it means to work with an interpreter, what it means to do interviews in Southeast Asia. And then finally, we discussed challenges around positionality. So how does your identity influence the research process, maybe how people interact with you, and those sort of dynamics. And then a secondary and very important goal of the 3 weeks of training was a kind of trial run for testing out different methods that we weren't sure, but thought would use during the field work. And so on the qualitative side, we focused on primarily interviews and participant observations. So this is what I'm showing here. This is an activity, participant observation activity, where we asked students to go out in pairs. And then they just sat quietly and observed, tried to blend in, and paid attention to all of their senses. So what do you smell, what do you hear, what do you see? And then take very detailed notes, and then go back home, write it up, and kind of polish it, and then compare it with your partner to see what kinds of different things did your partner observe, what snippets of conversation, the characteristics of people walking by or the birds in that space. Things, and it just heightens your ability to observe. And then I don't have pictures of it, but we also had students do a preliminary interview. So they were able to select someone to interview and come up with questions, and then conduct the interview, record it, and transcribe it. And then we had a debrief where we basically talked through what worked, what didn't. And the students were able to reflect on how using technology like phone or Zoom changed the interview, or how they could see the complications already coming up when we work with an interpreter versus doing an interview in your language. And then jumping ahead, when we finished the whole field school experience, we asked students to reflect back on this 3 weeks of training. And essentially they felt that it prepared them to do an interview, it prepared them to kind of build up their research skills and think through the roles and responsibilities of doing international research. But also a major takeaway was that it was way too short, a 3 weeks methods training versus an entire semester of a methods course. It doesn't really compare. So that was definitely one of the main takeaways. Okay. So then in addition to qualitative interviews, we had Scott. I'm just going to have him wave so you can ask him questions later. He introduced ArcGIS story maps. And so he really wanted people to think through, like, what kind of stories do you want to tell? And then the research ethics of telling those stories using ArcGIS online. And so one way that Scott did this was by introducing this template right here. And it gets students to think through what narrative they're going to tell and what elements do they need to tell those stories. So what kind of text, what kind of images or videos, what external sources would you need? Yes. Okay.
Okay, Olivia.
Yes.
So come back. But now I just want to go into like what we did. So the locations that we put here, when we were planning it, it didn't seem to be that hard. They are all close to each other. They were all in the same region within a 1 or 2 hours flight. And so the only handicap at the time was kind of like how much does it cost? And there's a lot of budget airlines. So that's another anecdote that I can share later. But in the sense, like we sent 2 groups of students. 4 people go to Indonesia and 2 plus Olivia and Mingli go to Thailand. And 2 of the students who went to Indonesia never had set a foot in Indonesia nor speak a word of Indonesian language. And the same is the same thing also for students who went to Thailand. And so they started in Chiang Mai, the Chiang Mai University language program that advertised Speak Thai in 15 days. So we asked the same program, Wisma Bahasa in Jogja, have like a 3 weeks immersion language and cultural training. And then at the end of that, they have to fly to the field site, which is here in Makassar, which is only about an hour and a half, I think, flying. And then from Chiang Mai going to Khon Kaen. So obviously, it's 3 weeks learning language for the first time is not recommended for doing research. However, it turned out that almost everybody who went through this program have a reflection, and we had asked students to write reflection about what was useful and what's kind of like could be improved, and everybody acknowledged they never really expected to speak fluently in the languages with 3 weeks. They were able to order lunch. They were able to greet people, and that alone was a big boost on with the confidence of just operating to feel slightly more independent in this. So these are some of the benefits of, even though it's short, but it is apparently very, very important. And we can go back into this about like, is this necessary? Is this something that maybe could be streamlined? But it's part of the discussion that after we finished the field school, we were asking ourselves. Okay, and I also like this point that one of our students mentioned, that when she started trying to speak in broken Bahasa Indonesia, it turned out that the partners who could not really speak English very well became so much more comfortable in trying to communicate in broken English. So then the communication started going there. So the field experience itself, it involved 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks in the field in rural setting. But you already heard about the preparation that preceded that. And the group size varies, sometimes 4, sometimes all the way to 7, because some of our partners actually let more participants from their group, undergraduate students as well as graduate students, to join the team in the field. Various disciplinary background ranging from agriculture, forestry, mechanical engineering, water engineering, anthropology. Do I forget something? Political science, yes, of course. Yeah, political science and kind of like just a variety of perspective here. And we experimented with just a few tools. Basically, from the boot camp, we also mentioned about topics of interest in this region. And then our partners, the mentors, were very generous, sharing what they have already prepared for our field school. So in Thailand, we went to Khon Kaen and 2 villages, Ban Sawang and Ban Por. By the time we arrived there, a lot of logistical planning, logistical arrangement has been taken care of. Communities have been informed, places to stay. These are all like pre-arranged by our partners. So it's just like a big task. And then we also got the briefing both before we went out there on Zoom on the ongoing research that they have done. So in Khon Kaen, this is a semi-arid region. So it's a lot of research, a lot of concern was really about water management, groundwater, salinizations. So these are kind of just a landscape of the area in Khon Kaen. And then in Sulawesi, because the group is a little larger, our partner actually proposed that we went to 2 sites. One is in a district adjacent to a national park in a neighboring Maros district. So it's about maybe 1.5 to 2 hours drive from the campus from the university. And the other one is on a mountain, and that's a region adjacent to the forest. And then it's kind of experiencing rapid land use transition changes from other agricultural use as well as forests into shallots, because in the last 20 years, shallot has become like a boom commodity there. And then at the end of that field work actually really in the field lasts for about a week. And then at the end of that, the team came back to the base camp and then doing all sort of like data analysis on the spot, on location, nearby, or on campus. And that continued also when we were just before we made the presentations out in Cambodia for the workshop. So this is some reflection that our students have written at the end of the field work. And I'll let that speak. I hope it's readable, sort of like speak for itself. But generally speaking, everybody was very appreciative of the field experience and appreciative also to what the partners had prepared and what were made possible. And then they also started looking into how were they able to gain anything when they actually did not have any background prior to the field school. And then there are also these other values that to me were more interesting, which is sort of like a realization amongst almost everybody, not just our students, but also from the students of our partners, about how the different questions were raised in the field, that it was very eye-opening, that my political science perspective could be complemented by issues of water engineering, and like all that sort of like questions that sometimes people might have taken for granted because they were studying this for a very long time already in depth, and then to have other students who are new in this area, the guest students, asking questions that kind of like open the possibilities of where the inquiry can go. And people also were very nimble. They found themselves to just kind of like shift into different mode of thinking. Trying to explain to teammates actually really helped to explain to oneself. So this self-growth to me seemed to be one of the best outcome on working in this intercultural and interdisciplinary work. And then everybody also realized how committed everybody was. That even if you're tired, but when you see your partners are actually still kind of like, you are sure that they are also tired, that they're still trying to accommodate different kind of need, then everybody just pick up and then, help for the benefit of the big group. So what are the strategies to work collaboratively? We didn't really have a very sort of like structured, rigid, you should do it this way. We basically give like a basic idea about doing research in agrarian setting. And I think since I'm a political ecologist looking into agrarian change, I always kind of like say, well, think about following a commodity. Looking into issues of like who owns what, who does what, like what do they do with the profit, and all these general questions about agrarian change. So they have like we have 3 groups in general that went in this field school, 2 in Indonesia and 1 group, even though the Thai group also went to 2 villages, but they went together, and every day you could do some debriefing together. So just to point out, this is the group, this is in no, I see. Let me go. Not too much information.
Thank you, Krista. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened in Thailand. So in Khon Kaen, Thailand, our research team has ongoing research on agrarian transformations in northeastern Thailand, especially as it relates to agriculture, and then agricultural engineering and kind of developing groundwater resources. So our 2 faculty partners accompanied us on really critical introduction days when we first got to one of the villages, and then also accompanied us on a lot of outside field visits that we'll talk about on the next slide. But I guess I'll point out people on the team. So when our faculty mentors were there, we had, okay, there we go, Ariel and Kara, our UH students, Sun and Buma are Khon Kaen University graduate students, and then myself and Dr. Mingli from the East-West Center. And part of the field school experience was really to bring students together to understand agrarian change, looking at these 2 major themes of crop constraints and water constraints. And so we did that by going to 2 villages that Krista mentioned earlier on the eastern border of Khon Kaen province. And we ended up doing almost around 30 interviews, which was a lot. We typically did it with the whole team, but occasionally we were able to split up based on those 2 different research topics. And then we also conducted additional field visits and interviews that were actually outside of our villages. So one was visiting Bon Rat Dam, which is there, point, sorry. And then also the Royal Irrigation Department and different farms and groundwater sites that were really informative and kind of just helped give us a broader perspective of the research topics that we were looking at. And then part of our process was daily debriefing led by Dr. Mingli. So in the mornings, we would typically over breakfast think through our intentions for that day, think through what farmers do we want to speak to, and how could we, what were our goals for that day. And then in the evenings, we would think through what were interesting topics that came up, what were questions that we had that were lingering that we wanted to follow up on. And one of my favorite parts of watching this whole process happen was mostly happening on the water team, where essentially during the interviews, these really complex ideas of irrigation and groundwater would come up. And so Sun, our graduate student from Khon Kaen University, during the interview would be like dropping pins on Google Maps and drawing diagrams and things like that. And then after the interview, he would sit down with Ariel, our UH student, and they would work through like, where is the highland, where is the lowland, and how do these things really work? So it was really kind of fun to see those processes play out. Yes, and I know that Ariel and others will expand much more on these processes in the 3rd session of our series. So this is just a little taste. And then finally, the output of these 2 projects was to create ArcGIS story maps. And this is just a screenshot of one of the crop ones that was created. And it basically has all sorts of videos and quotes and photos, but we'll get more into that soon.
Okay, so that's the first sort of like model of like how we work in a group that actually do not speak a common language or have the same disciplinary training. The second group was in Indonesia in the district neighboring national park. And this group was lucky because they had Pak Hussein, who is like a former village head, who also worked with the National Park Service and who knows everywhere, just like the back of his hand. And they took an approach that they would just follow Pak Hussein. And they call it like walk and talk, to give them an orientation about what's going on, because this region has been experiencing a lot of commercialization of crops, shifting land use, and commodity crash and boom. And so that's what they're thinking, that what they could do within this 1 week. And then our partners from Universitas Hasanuddin also wanted to incorporate information, the scoping from this field work to the bigger project, ongoing project on the Fair Frontier. If I'm mistaken on that, Pak Ali should make a correction later on the name of the project. So walk and talk is the method, and then oops, that's a little faster. The walk and talk. Let's see. Yeah, show me and tell me. So this is how the walk and talk works. Basically, Pak Hussein, that's Pak Hussein, bringing the team to the different path, and then one of our students, Anna in this case, took landscape picture with her iPad, and then annotating live annotation while Pak Hussein was interpreting what they were seeing. So this is sort of like a method that they developed impromptu. And again, just like what Olivia mentioned earlier, the team, the students are going to talk about how this actually materialized in the third talk of the series. And along the way, obviously, there are people that they could interview and to give more of the qualitative interpretation of that landscape. And then debriefing at the end of the walk. This is when the team just kind of like immediately, without fearing that there's some interruption to conversation that's already going on. So people could do some kind of like digital dialogue during the debrief, because during the debrief, you could type in what's going on, and then another person looking at the Google Doc, plug it in with the Google Translate, and immediately get this kind of like, okay, that's what my partner is actually talking about. So somebody would just be typing it in as a transcript of the conversation, or the essence of that conversation. So at the end of that, this is the output. And so these are the members of the team. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody's name was already included in this. So they found out that from just that limited information, it's kind of like looking into the concept of the squeeze that people who live in this village at the edge of the national park were squeezed by multiple forces, whether that's property squeeze, legal title, and what do you call it, like a price squeeze and labor squeeze. And I'm sure that our presentations are going to be kind of like clarifying on that issue. Okay, so that's the second approach. The third approach, oh, I should mention that earlier, the Rampai Gading, Micah Fisher was there for the entire time the field school was going on in Rampai Gading. With regard to the other side in the mountain, I was part of this team for a while. And the task that we had was to understand what's going on with this shallot boom that only occurred in the last 20 or 30 years. And the method that was used, that was basically, we started just by walking around, just to get familiar with this region. We didn't have the privilege of having a very knowledgeable ranger that could take us on and point us to the important historical sites. We didn't have ongoing research because even for UNHA's team, they had not really done any research here. So this is new. So they wanted us to do scoping, while Rompegading already had some basic information prior. So we started by walking around, and then we started talking about like, what do we want to focus? We have limited time, but when we were doing walking around, we did a lot of participatory observations. So our team also joined if there are any, anybody doing the planting of shallots, just to get an idea about the speed and the amount of labor that goes into different activities. And they decided that they wanted to focus on a question, who does what, and the timing of that. And throughout this walking around, they did extensive documentation. Everybody has phone cameras, sorry. Everybody has phone cameras. So they took like hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and everybody also recorded just kind of like the qualitative information that they were able to gain during the walk. And then we also put this during the debriefing. We put all those information, especially the visual, to explain to each other. So it's not just that we were doing the kind of like a live transcribing and translating, but we also have this more kind of like, why did you take that picture? Like what's going on there? Who are there? It's like all the processes could come alive here. Then this is when the story maps that we have had were becoming really useful because we decided on what the story, and then people started putting in, this is all the shared Google Doc, that people started writing the quotes of relevance. So it's like, we decide, for instance, land and water resources. So everybody who has information about land and water resources, if you have like just kind of like a good quote that can encapsulate the issue being faced by the farmers, can write it in whatever language that they're comfortable with. And then we can translate that later. And then think about what are the pictures that correspond with that. And so people just plop in copying the picture from their library of visuals. So with the three, how do you do this? Can you just click it? With the three strategies that we just described, what is really clear is how important, how critical daily debriefing was. Like, even though they have like different ways of doing this, daily debriefing is when the real research work and collaboration actually takes place. Because that's when there is no barrier. Even if you don't speak the language immediately, we can rely on translation. We can stop people and ask for explanations if you're not as aware about the context. And so these are just like some of the ideas that came out from the daily debriefing. And this could go on as you could see, it's like going on into the night, or sometimes you can do it also impromptu in the field. Okay, so the output, so we've had two story map output. The first one was the one from Khon Kaen that was explained earlier by Olivia. And the second one, we're just going to give you a little bit of a preview on this one. Can you just, yeah. So let me just do this. So this is kind of like the output of the how do you do this? Yeah, okay, well, so that's really like how you can capture a very complex information, although it's a very short period of time, into images and stories that accompany all these images. So this is why the design template was useful, because each of these quote was already put into like what picture accompany what, right? So that's, so we're just going fast, and you're going to get a link on this so you can play around with this on your own. Hey, that's a little too fast. Because I want to show the cool part of that. You actually, and this is the second video that was in there, but this one is the coolest, I thought. This is a sort of like, who are they? They are actually transporters of the harvest. And these are young men usually from the village. And they get a 10,000 rupiah for every trip for that particular field. But sometimes could be more if the field is further. And this is a tremendous skill because you go on narrow track. Yeah, certainly. Okay. Back to the bookshop. So then we, at the end of this, so at the end of this, we brought all the students and the mentors from the universities there, as well as inviting about a dozen other scholars, established scholars from other universities, as well as Taiwan. And 27 of us actually met in Siem Reap. And that was in Cambodia. And then we brought back everybody to ask a bigger question. The case studies were in the background, and people receive like a briefing about like what went on and what students learned. And then, but we asked these questions. What are the opportunities and challenges associated with international collaborative research? How can we promote and enable this collaborative research and training? And what steps should we take to build on this collaborative field research experience? So these are the bigger questions. And we created like a pretty informal but thorough planning, and Olivia is going to explain about how that went on.
Just very briefly. Okay. So to anchor our conversations, we started out by having the students present their story maps that got everyone on the same page for what everyone had just experienced. And then the general structure was to break people out into smaller groups. So sometimes we would try to mix together like early career student and more established scholars, while other times we would try to break them out by those categories. So for example, students would be asked what types of pre-field school experiences and training were most helpful for you. Our more established scholars might be talking about what is the pedagogical value of the field school, or what worked and what didn't in terms of planning and support. So these jointly produced outcomes were then shared when we would all come back together as a larger group. And then just one of the main outcomes that's worth noting is that out of all these conversations, it became really clear that people were really interested in replicating the field school and the workshop in some capacity in the future, which is very exciting.
So there's a lot of insight because it brought in like not just the direct experience preceding the workshop, but also like all people could reflect perspectives or resources that they could bring because of all the other senior scholars that actually joined us at the workshop. And three themes kept emerging. One is on preparation. And basically everybody was talking about like, it's very important to do this on not just the topics, but also on the schedule, because we actually didn't do a very good job. Turned out that when we were doing it on the field school, we already decided on the date, then our partners in Thailand are actually still in the middle of their school year. And there was also the issue of election locally that were kind of like missed when we were doing this planning. Early recruitment, and we thought we did a good job already by doing it about like 6 months prior, but turned out that was not sufficient. But early recruitment is not just about recruiting at UH, because we also need to recruit in the partner university, and then some of them were intimidated that they're thinking about the need to speak English. But if we had done a better job about like what is expected, turned out that was not key into this exercise. And then there was also this issue. We did a boot camp for our UH student, which is way too short, but at least it helped. But you know, like there are questions about like, could we do it also including our partner students? Clear communications. Eventually it became clear, but it took a while before we understood each other's roles. And then we realized, of course, that logistical issues are very time consuming and taxing. Then there is also the issue of language. Immediate reaction is that, of course, you need to learn the language first. And however, turned out to be that basic proficiency is really a must. So if you never had any background in there, you need to have like a crash course. However, in selecting students, there's an agreement that it's more important to have a common interest, curiosity about the subject or the region, rather than, you know, already have like a third-year language level, but not really interested in working in the setting or in the rural area. So in fact, actually another insight that came out here is that learning to communicate despite barriers, build your confidence, build, you know, like your sensitivity about other things that you have actually not allowed that to you know, come forward because you've been talking too much. But once somebody stopped talking, they start listening and observing so much better. And then there's this issue of time. We receive feedback that this is way too short, okay? And we need to build time. And everybody asked to have a team bonding time because as the field school went on, people became more comfortable to each other, and then it became so much more productive. So it's like, we need time, team bonding. It cannot just be work, work, work. You have to let us to have some time. But then it also, there's a question about like, if it is too long, it's fatigue, being away from home, as well as being kind of like away from the regular duties. So these are all in contradiction about like which one that we should actually pursue if we're going to do this again. But everybody agree that this is very valuable, and there are more opportunities for beginning researchers, whether that's a local university as well as the UH University. Every team members bring new perspectives and tools that everybody really appreciate. And then it's a very good opportunity to build future collaboration. This especially has capitalized on existing relationship with Khon Kaen University and UNHAS. And so that sort of like this exercise is everybody felt like very useful. So practical takeaway, start early. Now we say not 1 semester, it's a year. And then language and research method, if possible. You know, if students were selected early, they should probably take at least a semester of language and also method class. And this is a feedback directly to the planning team, which is myself and Mingli, Micah, and Olivia, who is kind of like, we say, hey, you know, we can travel to all these cool places. We even advertised it when we were recruiting students here that we were going to bring them to 3 countries. But the feedback, including from the students, that is a burden to pack and go places all the time. In fact, actually, if we could do the language training, the immersion on-site, even if it's not a, you know, like a fancy language school already, but, you know, having tutors would be beneficial. And that time could also be used for the team bonding prior to the field work. So that could double up. Visiting students at least 1 week prior. longer if possible in order to get acclimatized. So they have to get over their jet lag, getting some tutoring on the local language, getting used to just like the daily living there. And I can't resist to say this. This is really taxing, not just for the UH side. It's also very taxing to our host. It's a job that's really 24/7, especially after the team arrived. Thinking through about transportation, accommodation, people getting sick or not sick. But it's really sort of like having courtesy visit to the different offices, whether that's within the university or within the community or agencies. That's really like a very taxing situation. So these are some of the promises that we are going to make. We certainly are going to write it up and hope to come up with like what pedagogical lessons that we have. Media output, I already showed you some snippets of that. And then this is something that we need to build as well. And then there. As Jeff mentioned, this is one, Jeff or Miriam mentioned, this is one of the 3 this semester, and then one is coming up in the spring. We couldn't fit everybody in this semester schedule. So the second one is provocative collaboration is dead. How to revive it. And so that one is going to be featuring our partner from Khon Kaen, Professor Dr. Sukanmaya Chunquan, as well as Professor Arif Sahide from University of Hassanudin, and Micah Fisher, and facilitated by Minhee Yong. And that would be next month, back on Wednesday. Everything is usually on Wednesday afternoon, right? Except for today, because we're doing it in geography. Okay. 1 hour. We can take a break by having some coffee if you want.
Well, this is the time for questions. Maybe Jeff will moderate questions.
Yes, questions from the room and also online, but let's start with the room. Anybody? Yes, please.
So I have two questions. The first one is, how can we ensure that the transfer knowledge to local community so that they can understand the goal of our field work or our research within their perspective, so that our perspective. And also to ensure that the sense of reciprocity to the local communities is there. So we know that they are also taking the benefit from our existence there, not just us learning from. So that's the first question. Oh, sorry, in a very limited time. So yeah, how to ensure that. And second one, is there any community leaders or like parent or something or someone in Rampa Gading such as who has the role like Pak Hussein? If there isn't, how do we ensure that our scoping research or fieldwork has results that are able to capture the story that is not only can be seen by our own eyes, but also maybe hidden from the local communities or indigenous people version of the story. So yeah, that's the question.
Thank you so much. And you are asking something that I forgot to mention, which is please remember that this is field school. It's not field research. No way that I would recommend that findings to be used to create policies or even designing like something intervention. And so this is field school. It's almost like a class exercise, except we do it in field. So the goal was really the learning for the students during that time. But the question about how the reciprocity can also extend to the communities has been raised again and again. And in our sort of like exercise, students actually went to, the team actually went to have a meeting prior to entering to just explain about like what they were trying to do. And again, the emphasis that we are trying to learn rather than we're trying to solve anything. So yes, the scoping doesn't necessarily represent a full reality. And I have to kind of like keep reminding students, even though we come up with fancy and sort of like output, that it's not final. It needs to be confirmed, corroborated, and probably require like longer term research. Everybody realized that even with Pak Hussein, who is the eldest, the elder of that region, he's only one voice. Okay, so like there might be like other voices that we never heard, right? And the same thing when we were doing the walking around, like who were out there? It might just be one voice because we only had it for a week. Do you wanna add, Ariel? You know about that? But it is one of the discussion that actually was extensively discussed when we were at the workshop about this preparation. We already had that consultations with the partner scholars, but that could also be extended that we do the consultation with partner communities. But in our thoughts, like once people know how to behave and sort of like do research, then they would do that for the real research.
So following up on those very interesting questions, if I understand correctly, one of the two UNHAS projects was an extension of work they'd already been doing. So I wonder if one of the best practices you'd recommend is that future training would go back there, where you can talk to the community who already knows the primary researchers and let them know that, you know, they'd like to bring in students to learn from them and to learn about techniques. That might be a way to address your concerns, right? And get the community involved. But again, it is a very short program.
Yeah, I think it may not be ours to answer. It might be, you know, if Pak Alif or Ajahn Khan wanted to say something. Is there any comment on the chat? No. But these are questions that probably are going to be raised in the second webinar next month, because that would feature them as the partners, but like what benefit them or not benefit them.
Interesting. Thank you so much. I know some of the speakers I because I had to deal with organizing those whole things so much more energy into it. Really appreciate the recap over here. So relationship between field study and field school here. It feels research and field school here. It's really interesting. I was actually thinking about that question. Either you have they lead students to a place where research has already been done, and students go in there with a new pair of eyes and just ask the questions they could see and go through their process. And afterwards, I suppose a briefing with the researchers who has already done research in this area will probably be kind of an interesting exercise to see what new things students might see, and what things they could learn more of from the research side. The other thing is going to a new place, totally new, but with researchers with the eye of further research. And with an experienced researcher would see a lot more very quickly about what are the core questions that need to be researched. And students can just be given the space to work through their research methods and interviews and everything and come up with their stories. And you know, if that can be also matched by a research intended kind of a further exploration, that might be kind of interesting.
Actually, for Unhas, that's going on, and I think that's the same way in Khon Kaen as well, because the Khon Kaen team has been doing a long-term research in these villages. So all the people that were meeting with our field school team were people that already were known to the researchers at Khon Kaen. And again, I would not dare to answer that, and I would leave it into the next one.
I'd also say that I think almost more than research, or clearly more than research, the whole point of the exercise was collaboration and building ability to work collaboratively, to work interdisciplinary, not only with American students, but with early career and Southeast Asian students. And so we do it through a research type exercise, but it's a collaboration and the building of scholars that is the bottom line here.
Yeah, maybe I could add to that, what interested me so much about this project that Jeff and Krishna had proposed was that it had two parts. One was to take students from UH to work with students in Southeast Asia, and the other was to bring early career scholars from Southeast Asia to UH. And that's gonna happen in the spring semester. With the idea that one goal is really building cohorts of people interested in the same subjects, regardless of where they're going to school. This is something, I'm an archaeologist, this is something I've been working on with Southeast Asian archaeology as well, is to try to bust those boundaries so that people from different countries studying in different places can get to know each other, because they are, future colleagues after people like me retire. And it's important that they have these close relationships across countries in Southeast Asia and that they cross-fertilize. So in my case, with archaeology, I have a certain subject I study in a certain place, which is in Cambodia, but it's good for students who are doing completely different dissertations on totally different subjects in their very different countries to come and do that, right? It's good for the brains. It's good to get the kind of perspectives I think that Krishna was talking about. Oh, there's Adam.
Palif. Good to see you again, Palif. Can you hear us? Oh, he's frozen. Oh, he's frozen.
Ah, shoot, he'll come back.
There's a question in there.
Yeah, there is a question.
Oh, that was fun. Others in here?
Students, what questions do you have about this? Yes.
So my name is YCD fellow from the Philippines. So I graduated from a university, a Jesuit university, where field-based training is an integral part of our curriculum. So we go to the rural areas in the Philippines and we immerse for a couple of days, maximum like a week or two. And one of the criticisms that we get from the public and some of the communities is that we use communities for personal learning and development. How do we reconcile that with our objectives and goals and thoughts on that?
We're very cognizant of that. And there were ideas about bringing some gift to communities that are entertaining us with the time. And certainly not just kind of like taking 1 or 2 hours of their time. But the other part of that is also this tension about the size of the group. If you have a large group, it's really taxing to the host. Even just hosting them, even if we pay for our accommodation, but it's just kind of like half a dozen people invading a home is not a good idea. So that's the tension that sometimes we think about, like when we started, we only thought about having 2 students. And then there's kind of, well, all this work for only 2, that's kind of like seems to be like, how do we know anything's working? Because the rule is like it should not be anecdotal. We should have at least a few experience in there. Yeah. So but I think these are like ideas that we really have to keep in mind, questions that we have to keep in mind, that and part of the pre-departure orientation and the training was always talking about the ethic, about our positionality, about arriving there, rather than arriving just as a sort of like, oh, I have the right because I'm a student that my priority is learning, but it's give or take. So not just within the group, but also with the community. But thank you for the reminder.
Let's go to Pak Ali before we lose him.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry for my connection here. Yeah, Ibu Krishna already she already presents very good, yeah. And I just want to add that my feeling, yeah, our feeling here as a local host, this is just not as programmatic collaboration, but we feel that this is organic collaboration, yeah, because the collaboration still continue, and we also still connected as well, yeah. And I think this is very good for us. We learn a lot, even in the field that it is just 1 week, but actually the collaboration before and after this field work, I just feel that this is an organic collaboration that I think it could raise in the future, and I think we could be replicate broader collaboration in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Palif.
Do people have questions for Pak Ali? Well, we have them right here.
And if you got some here, but we have one online. Somebody here?
Be brave.
We'll take the online one and you think of your questions. Maybe.
Yes.
Who is coming?
Okay.
Charles.
Oh.
Khon?
Charles. Oh, Charles Ham? Yeah.
Hi, Charles Ham here.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Professor Krishna. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I wish I can be with you in the rice fields and amazing places. Thank you, wonderful presentation by your team and student. I am excited learning from the experience, but also I also have a question about. By the way, I'm a PhD student in UH in urban and regional planning, focusing on equity and resilience in small island planning, especially my dissertation in North Maluku, capital city. But my question is, I know you seems to focus a lot on making sure that UH students are ready and prepared in the joint learning. But I'd like to see on the other side, how do you make sure, or how do you bring or inspire these students from the local universities in the host cities or field to inspire them that they have a stake or they have a role in this joint learning process and what they can contribute? Because I can see that some places they might be terrified or feel a little incompetent as they deal with these students of the University of Hawaii. Just would like to hear more from you on your experience. Thank you.
Well, that was actually the takeaway that we had. That we tried to do some online communications. It wasn't as effective, and but there was a request basically that the training on methods should happen in both places, at UH and also at the other university. The next initiative that I know is going to have like online research method hybrid that is done for broader population, not just the students that are going to go to the field, but also just like a regular semester class that would also allow enrollment from partner universities. So that was one of the outcome of this that, and hopefully, by having that connection prior to doing the field work, people are getting a lot more familiar with each other, with the personalities as well. I know, for instance, with Unha's team, two of the staff from the forestry faculty was enrolled in my class online when we were doing it on the hybrid here or there. This was back in 2021, I think. And just having some breakout groups that Sarah was one of our students who went there, and Carno remembered each other, and then sort of, oh yeah, we were in the same group, and so they have already some kind of like earlier connection. So it could work, but it has to be designed that it really has to allow this kind of a breakout opportunities. Because if we do it asynchronously, then students actually do not interact with each other. Any other? Ariel.
I'm just gonna ask a question from in a lot of people's mind. Is there gonna be field school next year? How can students who are here right now participate or involved?
This question actually came up also during the workshop, when we also thought about ideas that we should let the current students to become like a peer mentor for the next crop of students. And so that, like, I don't know what the form is going to be. Like, well, if it's UH student, whether the UH student would go to the field as well, or it would just be part of the pre-departure orientations. But one lesson we got from the pre-departure orientation was that we tried to start students to read and having some question discussion during the spring after they were selected. Nobody did that. Everybody was busy with their semester assignment, the regular semester assignment. So we really had to wait until May 15th before we require any submission. But then by that time, it's really packed. Yeah, so it has to be built in, including credit earning, that a buy-in from people who wanted to join the field school should probably be, even if they don't pay monetarily, should be in the commitment of taking certain classes.
We have a question online from Nurhadi.
Nurhadi.
Yes.
Thanks, Nur.
Sorry. I just want to respond to a question earlier about from our part in Indonesia, what was inspired us to or attracted us to join this collaboration. I think from our side, because in Hasanuddin University, we are based in Forest and Society Research Group. We have several younger researchers who are already involving in several research. So while doing that research, their interest grew, and I think by the time we received the invitation for this collaboration, we are all excited to learn from each other. So they're really curious about how research doing has been done in US universities. So they are curious about methodologies and how, not even only methodologies, but how to get involved in international collaboration and to meet people from Hawaii University and to experience the cooperation in the field. So that's a new kind of experience that they really want to as an aspiring researchers. So that's why we really enjoy these processes. Yeah.
Thank you. That was an excellent comment.
Puna N is a new fan of Nur Hadi.
I would like to take a class by him.
Did you hear that, Pak Nur Hadi? Yeah, they would be engaged in this long conversations following the field work about which is like any obscure readings in my book, but Adi and Puna is just super interested. He's like one of the most knowledgeable scholar that we met over there.
Then sure. Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, all right. I just wanted to come up to the front and thank everyone who has chosen to attend. We have a nice full room here at the University of Hawaii, but we have a full Zoom room. I know there are a lot of Unhas people there, probably Khon Kaen, so thank you very much. Terima kasih and kapun ka. And we're really glad that we could get this started. We see this as the beginning of a long-term collaboration. For some of us, it builds on collaboration some of our colleagues already had at these universities, but it's just the next step. And we're learning a lot. I'm supposed to tell you that we would like you to finish a Center for Southeast Asian Studies post-webinar survey. So I'm going to pass this around in the room. And thank you very much for coming. We hope to see you or know that you exist in the somewhere in the Zoom sphere for our next talk. Thank you very much.
Please.